Industry Summit series. Today we are joined by Grace Henderson, who is a teacher, a teaching artist, an artist living in Knott County, Kentucky. Today's session is going to be about confidently teaching creativity. I'm going to read the description for you. In this session, we'll be exploring the process of how to create a meaningful art experience in a school setting. Grace will share her own journey of how she became a teaching artist and then what she has learned along the way. Topics will include how to find those who want to hire you, how to create a great lesson plan, and what to do on the day of the residency, how to take care of the business side of things. Grace's advice is so practical and so rich. We just couldn't resist having Grace join us. So we're very fortunate. Grace lives in Knott County and has over 30 years of experience teaching math and art in K-12 schools. She started her business just a little artsy in 2017 when she began offering group painting classes to students of all ages. Grace creates paint classes that are designed for anyone, artistic or not, which can be tailored to the needs, skills, and maturity level of the group. Grace has created a variety of art-integrated lessons that teach core content through engaging students in a variety of media and techniques. Individualized lesson plans can be designed to fit the curriculum and are a great way to teach math, science, and ELA concepts. So we are going to, I'm going to turn it over to Grace. If you have any questions, please add those to the chat and we will go with the flow. All right. Thanks, Grace.
All right, thank you. I am going to go ahead and get right into, I have a PowerPoint and I do that because then I stay on talking point. So let's see. All right, and this will help me now. If you send something in the chat, can everybody hear me? I'll look at the picture. Okay, all right. What we're going to do on this is we're going to be looking at some different slides. It mostly just keeps me on talking point to where I need to be. But she told you a little bit, but you know, how did I get there? Because you just heard I was a math teacher too. So, you know, I went to school and I wasn't totally expecting to end up being a math teacher, but we'll get to how that happened in just a minute. So I'm going to take about just a minute or two and actually, let's see if my, it's not letting me. There we go. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to my first real art teacher, and this is Mammy Markham. I can't even remember her real name, but everybody called her Mammy. I lived in Lexington, and I was in elementary school, and she, somebody said, hey, my grandmother teaches art lessons, paint lessons. And so a group of us all started, you know, going to her, but you know, she would charge $1 a session per person. So my brother teases me all the time because he used to come with it too. A lot of them went mostly because they just like to listen to her talk. But you know how she did not get into art until she was in her 70s. And it was funny because she always liked it, but she's busy raising a family. She grew up in, you know, she was born in the turn of the century. So she was, you know, in the Eastern Kentucky, living in Corbin and Manchester and raising, I think she had 7 children. So I remember she moved to Lexington at one point, and she's still taking care of family. She was still, when I met her, she still, not only her husband, she had a child and a grandchild that lived with her. And she started going to UK extension classes to learn art because she'd liked it. And so then next thing we know, she decided to start teaching. Lexington Herald one time, I remember did an article on her back in the later 70s, and they called her Grandma Moses of the Mountains because her paintings typically were of scenes that she remembers. And I think the one I remember the most, and my brother and I talk about it, is she did one of the frontier nurses in the snow, traveling across the creek, going into, and I think it was commissioned actually by there in Manchester. So she would tell us all kinds of stories. But she's who taught us how to do oil painting. And I liked her. I had lots of other teachers along the way. in high school, and then again in college because I went ahead. But when I think back to the one that had the most impact, I would say it would have been her. And so I went off to college. I learned art. The only thing I knew for sure I was not going to teach. Of course, then I got out and I had trouble finding a position, and my mother kept saying, you might want to look at it. And I found a position, and I went in as an aide, and I love teaching, and I just didn't know it until then. But nobody needed a full-time art teacher, so I was good at other math all the time. So they threw me in some math classes, and so then I went back and got my math major. So then, long time going, finally, where I'm at the place where I have a chance. And so I taught math and art for many, many years. And then my kids finally are all raised. And my daughter-in-law decided, she wasn't my daughter-in-law then, said, have you ever done a group painting class? And so I said, well, not really. I mean, I do it at school. And so she had me go to one with her. And then I said, oh, okay. So then I started practicing around with that, and I found I really liked it. And I kept thinking, okay, my family's raised, I'm at a different place, so maybe there's time for me to do other things. And so what I found was that I started doing the group classes in the evening for adults and for kids, having some different opportunities in the library and the Girl Scouts, and some in the extension office was really good. But I went to the Artisan Center up here, and the Artisan Center is the one who helped me the most move to the next thing. Let me see if there you go. And so hopefully it's telling me what we're doing here. So there were a lot of different things. So we had the group thing, and then through the Artisan Center, I learned through they had a meeting one time with the Partners for Education at that time, and now it's changed names to Partner for Rural Impact. And that's where I learned that my dream job really would be to be a teaching artist. So then I can teach my art forms and go to all the schools. In our area in Eastern Kentucky, most schools, most of the elementaries do not have art programs all the time. Some of the bigger ones have been able to add it, but I've gone in a lot of the different counties around here, and most of them don't have an established art program. So I saw that as an opportunity. And so I had to start going through that. And when I did, the first thing to do is to apply to the teaching directories. And so Kentucky Arts Council was one of the first ones I was told to try to get on. I was already working on trying to get into the some of the other ones, the Partners for Education, which is Partners for Rural Impact, but also I started going to some other ones like that. So started on the teaching directory, but you can also find out about through social media and website. I find I don't need the website as much, but so to be a teaching artist, a lot of times you just need to, first of all, get together your credentials. And all of them, if you get onto one, it's a little easier to get on another. And we'll talk about some of the other ones besides Kentucky Arts Council you can be on. So you start applying to the rosters. And so when I was getting together my credentials, one of the things that meant is I needed to have some art show or some form, you need to have some recent exhibitions and stuff. So the Artisan Center was really good to help me set that up and to get on the art, to present my own work and to prove that I did have my own artwork that I was doing, not just teaching. But some of the rosters that, you can get on besides Kentucky Arts Council is also, if you're down, Partners for Rural Impact have openings at different times. Arts for All Kentucky is a great one to be on. That's another one that is very functional here in Kentucky. And then in my local area, the settlement school, a lot of times will get grants to South Art. So that's kind of, first of all, how I started, but then becomes the hard part, and it's getting the first grant. And I know that to find my students, it was like, well, how do you get hired now? And that's where you have to somehow get known by others. And so when I looked at it, I was trying to figure out how to find that. And sometimes it's going to those teachers you might already know and say, wouldn't you like to have a grant? Wouldn't you like to have art in your school? Here's what you need to do. And so you can do that a couple of times. sometimes then being on the registry, sometimes people are actually already looking for some. And so, but I found that in the long run, once you can get those first ones established, that word of mouth is your best way to get a residency. So once you get on and you do one, a lot of times you might be asked to come back. And so that's what has helped, because especially within some of the other grants, they talk among themselves. And so they'll say, and so it's funny too, Judy Sizemore, everybody knows Judy Sizemore, and you can't hardly go in a school anywhere and say her name and somebody doesn't already know her. They've either had her or she's taught them when they were younger, or they've heard of her or come in contact, but that's because she does a good job. And you'll find that's true, that as you get in as a teaching artist and you do it, then other schools will mention it. Of course, you want them to be sharing it. So a lot of times that becomes the hard part too, is to actually have them share it on their social media. A lot of times they will, and that's helpful. If you take pictures, you have to be kind of careful on, can't show their faces unless you've had all these permission signs. So, but they can share, and a lot of times they will share within their school social media and within themselves and within their areas. But you know, I know we have to be careful about just taking pictures of with the students, which I loved doing when I was, but I couldn't do it in a school setting. And so I don't have very many of me in this classroom just because of that. That becomes part of it. But the next part is actually, you know, where do you find your ideas? And because, you know, you want to have a program that helps the teachers. And you know, of course, I wish they would just say, I just want an artist to come in and teach art. But most of the time they're constrained that they have to work within, it has to meet curriculum. It has to be part of it in some way. So that's where you have to always be kind of keeping your eyes open and within whatever art form that you are. And so, you know, I can give you ideas about how I find things for visual, but it would be like in some of the other art forms, you know, I'm sure there's other ways to look for it, but within the visual ones, you know, a lot of times I'm always watching for good ideas and making a notebook and keeping that. And I sometimes type it on my phone if I see something that I think, hey, that would be a good lesson. You know, where I do research. A lot of times someone will ask me, you know, for a particular lesson. You know, they might call and say, this is what I need. And, you know, is there any way, you know, I didn't see it on your list, but could you do this? Could you meet that need? And usually I'll say, well, give me a couple of days and then I can, you know, see if I've got it or not. And I usually can come up with something I'm going to come up without some of those different things. So a lot of times I'll look on the internet, I'll look in books. We don't have as many magazines anymore. Those are by the way. But you know, I do look in Pinterest because sometimes I'll see something that'll spark my mind, and that's where, you know, I can find maybe a way to go. And I also like to look at one website that I've really been happy with. Is, if you've never seen this, it's called The Art of Ed. So if you're trying to do any kind of professional development or get more ideas or how to work in the classroom, then you might want to check this one out. If I were 20 years ago and trying to get my, you know, art education, this is where I go. And for a long time, Kentucky didn't approve them for their masters, but now Kentucky does include, if you're an art teacher and you want to get your masters, now Kentucky accepts the degree that they have. That's one of the things that they do. So as a teaching artist, you don't need it, but it's good. But what they have is professional development called pro learning. And you can go in there and you say, okay, I want to just learn about clay. Maybe there's some more ideas about clay projects. There's all kinds of little workshops that you can get on, and it'll teach you about that. And it's, you know, and it's geared for people who are going to be in schools. So it's, I've always liked this particular website, and I keep changing. It's grown a lot because the people that that developed this whole university were art teachers, two art teachers that couldn't find a master's program that they were satisfied with. And so then they started creating their own content. And it started out with magazine articles, then it went to, and it really exploded where they were ready during COVID to help people deal with that, because they were already doing everything online because it's gone national. And so this is a really good program to explore. Now, right now, I think you could do the pro learning, and I usually binge watch if I'm going to do it and just pay for a month subscription instead of paying for the whole year. I go on there, and I didn't do it this year because I've got quite a few things written up. But in the past, if I wanted to learn about a particular area, or what's new in watercolor, or what's new in acrylic, or what's new, what else are people doing across the nation, they'll have a lot of different teachers and different segments. I think they have over 200 different learning modules in there, and they're very well done by other art teachers. So it's something you might want to look at. It also helps you, like, being in the classroom, because as teaching artists, sometimes we don't have a lot of experience of actually being in the school too. How would it be a good way to manage the class when they're coming through there, even though you have the teacher? Because sometimes your teachers are very engaged with the art program, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they think, ooh, it's my free period, and they go over to the side and they're only going to be grading papers. So they may not be engaged. And so the kids may not be as engaged. You'll find out that in any good art residency, the more engaged your adults are in the classroom, the more engaged the students will be. But that's just something I would recommend, that I've had great success with and got a lot of benefit out in the years before. So planning a lesson. A lot of times I'll do a template. I'm going to pull some up here and just show. I know that within each grant, they have the way they want. They'll eventually write up a plan. A lot of times I start with, I'm going to share something different here. Let me see if I can pull up. I had here you go. So I'm going to share this one. All right, so here's a sample of a lesson plan template. And then if I need to then plug it into whatever, to give it to the teacher when they're writing the grants, or, if I'm helping them do that part of the grant, I've already got it all formulated. So I might here's a one I did a few years back. And this one was supposed to be for social studies. It also was one that we included a book. And we were specifically coming in and teaching about Kentucky history. So I would usually start and write any of my grant standards that involve the arts, and we'll pull up those here in a minute. And most of us all have that. Then I looked, and some of this may have changed, because this is, this kinds of things in the education department changes from year to year. Every once in a while they'll do updates. So every once in a while, if I'm going to do it again, but this one was written several years back. But this one told about the specific things that they wanted me to meet in the social studies. And so then, I'm going to write down the different things to help me remember. Here's my checklist to make sure I don't forget anything when I go to the classroom. Here's the, thing that's going to help, me be prepared what I'm trying to do while I'm in there. Then I usually have a picture, of what it's going to look like. And so I have my little watercolor tunnel book that we were going to do in this specific lesson. And it talks about what I did in the different days. We'd go in and we would maybe paint one day when they were constructing some. Usually if there's a book involved, a lot of times I leave that for the teacher to do before or after. And that usually is in the, depending on what the lesson is. I think I've got one other lesson plan, another one that's here. Let's see. I had a couple of them ready to go here. No, I must have just kept one up. So I'll go back to let me see if I can get back to all right. So the next thing, so that would be my integrated art. So that's what I was talking about, is they don't a lot of teachers anymore, unless you go into an art class. Next week, I actually am going into an art class for 3 days. But usually, that means you're going to do something that they can't already do, or they don't have the technology or they want to add to it. So I'm more of a math one, doing next week for tessellations is what it's called. But generally, if you're going into an English class, they're going to want to be able to justify we're illustrating poetry or, whatever, or social emotional learning. That is part of our things that they like to incorporate into the different ones. The national standards, of course, if that's all we ever had to do, that would be the best. But here's some of the other subject matter that you can try to be thinking ahead. How could I make this? And because I was a math teacher, I can think of lots of ways to incorporate math. But you incorporate some part of reading, whether it's, illustrating poetry or including a book or something. Social studies, that's the one I just showed you. Science, and then, there are anything, if you started including technology and things, that helps. And so, a lot of times I've got several lessons that I specifically put that in there so that it can, the teacher say, hey, yes, I do want this thing. And there is I don't think I'm going to show it today, but there is a fella named Ted Hansen, Phil Hansen, and he has a really interesting story about what happened in his life. So I won't really share it now, but it will be in the lesson plan there, so you could look it up. And he was an artist that got really into pointillism. And so, he would create everything was just little tiny dots, but he did it so much that he began to have problems in his hands. And so he started to have a shake, and the more his hand shake, the tighter he held his pencil, and he ended up completely having neurological damage to his hand, and he can't stop shaking his hand. So, he was devastated that he went to art school and had all these wonderful pictures and stuff that he wanted to create, some that he already had created. And his doctor finally said, well, why don't you just embrace the shake? And so that's what, there's like a TED Talk, but he's had a lot of other workshops that he's talked about embracing the shake, which means he had to learn to be creative. How could he still create art if he has a shake? And then he also started thinking, once he started doing that, so he started showing you within the video how he did that. If we have time at the end, then I'll include that. But then I was looking up some of his other things, and he was also talking about you learn from your limitations. And that's what this video talks about, is that sometimes you say, paint anything you want. I found that usually it will shut students down because there's too many ideas, but if you say, I want this in it and this in it and this in it. And, somebody called the other day, I need this to be, we're going to the aquarium. So we need to have something that involves an aquarium, and we need something that involves, science, and they'll start telling you. Or I see one of my participants that's here today one time called me and said, we really want to do pet portraits. And so that was kind of fun. So, well, I don't know how to have 40 people do the same, different pets all at the same time and be a meaningful experience. So I had to research and look and find a way how could we all create? So I came up with a lesson plan for how we could all do our own individual pet portraits and be satisfied that we had a good product. And I wasn't personally drawing them all, because what I looked out when I looked at other people were doing it, sometimes they would have to draw, and then you don't have time to get it done in the short amount of time that you usually have. So how could you overcome that? So sometimes having limitations, asking, if a person asks you, can you do this? And it's been really interesting because I see some of the other artists that I know, and they do the same thing. They'll say, hey, it's a music theme. And, I know that from there, you can then take it, and then you can decide, how could I make this a math lesson? How can I make this part of history, which is easier in a lot of respects? Or how can I, and so as you know your own, what you're doing, think outside the box. How can this meet that need for that teacher? And so then that helps us to be creative. And that's what I'm on, trying to always look for, is how could I integrate that back into this? All right. And so then these are those different criteria that we specifically are trying to meet for the art. And this will be in the PowerPoint, that if anybody needs to see this slide later, but you can look it up online. But it talks about the general ones that we're trying to meet. But like I said, all the other ones that you're trying to meet for social studies or Kentucky, you can just get online, and those documents are online and easy to pull up and go to find those different standards. Besides the art standards, you can find the ones that are for specifically, like I did, 5th grade, social studies. So if you just put in, Kentucky standards and, just try to find that, that's usually how I create those. All right. So then on the day of the residency, now you're ready to go. And so the first thing you want to do is make sure you have your plan, you have your materials. If some of us have lots of things you have to carry in, and some of them I feel like they're really lucky because they're going in and they're doing performance, but they don't have to carry as many things in. But so you have a plan so you don't forget anything. You have in your mind how I'm going to do that, because what you'll find is something's going to go wrong. Something's not going to quite work. You're going to have a plan, but sometimes you have to be flexible. Well, a lot of times you have to be flexible, because you might get there and something's changed with the plan. Oh, we're not going to put you in the same room. You're going to change rooms all day. Or you're not going to, we had to shorten it because there's a meeting today. So you've only got, 30 minutes to do an hour program or whatever. So sometimes you have to think quicker. Sometimes you get lost if you go into schools. I'm constantly going to schools I've not been to before. And so finding out the procedure, every school has a different procedure when you go in as far as check-in, because they're being very careful with anybody coming into the school building. And I, try to also make sure I've got my materials as much as I can ready to go when I get there and ready to distribute or have on hand, so that I don't forget them. That's why sometimes in my lesson plan, I make that list for myself so that I don't forget items. And then that helps you on that, be ready for that first day. I also created, I'm going to share it before I do this. One thing I found that has helped me tremendously is I started creating that I have a template that I created, because I'm sometimes forgetting what I've done. If I've got multiple programs, that when I only had them occasionally, I could keep up with the list. But if I make a list where I have the school, the date, I'm going to need to know the mileage. I can figure that out. And then I start making checklists for myself. Have I sent an invoice to them? A lot of times now they might want a quote before an invoice. Have I already got my lesson plan made? Have I done it? Because sometimes schools contact me and I think I'll do that later and I'll send it to them, so I don't check it off. Is it a new place? Is it going to require this? What supplies am I going to need to order or take with me? And then the last one, did I ever get paid? So that I can keep track. So this is just sort of something I created on my own. If you, as a different, you could easily add or take away what doesn't pertain to you. But I have found that this has kept me more organized, because the more organized I am, the better in the long run I feel. I'm ready for, the program. I'm ready to take care of all the paperwork. I'm ready to do all that, as long as I know it. Let's see. I'll go back to the PowerPoint. Let's see. And I think what it's doing is each time it's going back to the, let's see, PowerPoint. Oh, here we go. That'll put me back on the place. All right, let me go back to the regular place I was. Hang on a minute. Here we go. All right, and then the next thing I was going to say, let's see, I guess. All right, is I started creating demonstration videos. It started during COVID, and it was also an idea from that Art of Ed. Somebody in there, they did it because they said a lot of times they found they were teaching the same subject over and over and over, and they couldn't remember if they said it in that class or they didn't. So they would create short videos so that they knew they covered all the content. And then during COVID, it became really, really important because sometimes you were not in the room, and they would want you still to do some of the art programs, but you were having to do it, and they would, I'd have to share the video or whatever with them. So I think I'll show this one today. Let's see if this takes me to the right video. Sometimes it's been a little weird. Okay, here we go. All right. So a lot of times when I create a video, I'll tell you the process in a minute, but what I found is the most helpful is, even if I don't show the whole thing, it helps me to remember what I did, what was the process I did. So if I don't do that program, I do the program once this year, and then I don't have anybody ask me till next year again, then I can pull up and I can remember, oh, this is what I did. And so then when I go in the classroom, they can see what I'm doing. So here, this is a program I'm doing next week in one of my schools. And sometimes I add directions. So this one, I've got more on it than usual. I sometimes actually have the written part, and we're talking about how we're going to create the main square. Sometimes I have it going really fast, but on this one, I found I went very slow speed because they don't always see. So I'm going to go through and show the process of creating it. And as I watch the video, I'm going to skip. We don't need to watch me cut. And then I can start showing.
Grace,
Yes.
are we supposed to be seeing that on the screen? Because
Yeah, I think
you'll
so.
need to share that window because we're not seeing your
I thought it
video.
was. Okay. All right. Hang on. Yes? No? Okay. So anyway, so the video itself, it didn't pull up when I was trying to share. All right, so it's just kind of showing now, it helps them because a lot of times if it's something small, you can see, this is something that's really like a 2 or 3 inch little square. If I was trying to show them individually or up at the board, they can't see in the back of the room. So one way magnifies it, and then it helps me as I go through and I try to explain to them how we're going to do this project. Then I've got it and I'm all set, ready to go. And I can go through that video, and I'll kind of skip ahead here. So you can kind of see I'm going through and I'm doing that project, and I'm showing them the different ways, how could we create that tessellation? How can we make it, so everybody's done something different. And then when I pull it up, then I'm ready. And the good news is that I can be quiet for a minute and watch it. And so then as they go through, we can talk about it. I can pause it, start it. If they didn't see in the back room, you can replay it. And so I found this real helpful. So I continued, and it helps. But here's the problem. You might have a technology issue that day. So I'm always prepared to do it in person, whatever it is. You could walk in that day and it may not actually work out for you that particular day. So I always try to have my backup is to have a physical opportunity to create it in case you walk in and you start to do it and something goes awry and you can't. And I don't always play the video when I'm there. If I've given it to a teacher to use for something, but I can slide it forward and backward and pause it. So you can see I'm just going to go back and forth, and I actually show them that part and freeze on that screen. So sometimes that's all I do is I skip forward and backward in the video so that they can kind of see. So let me change what I'm showing here. I'm going to share and go back to this. Okay. And so then, whatever video I have, you can go through and use it in the classroom. So last time that I shared some of this information, a lot of people wanted to know how I did it. So I did bring some of that with me today to kind of show you. So as we look at it, I'm not promoting any particular place, but I'm just saying for us, I don't have a lot of shopping opportunities. So a lot of stuff when I bought it, and I just quickly ordered it and stuff from Amazon just because it was there. But you might have the equipment, and a lot of times it helps to have something that does the lighting so you don't have so many shadows, but you don't have to have it. Or this is a stand. I do it with my iPad, and I'm doing up close now. Depending on your art form, you might not do you might be talking to them, so you wouldn't need the stand. And so you could just, get something that you videotape. For me, and I'll go back to that, a lot of times you can film it with your iPad or tablet, whatever kind you had, or even your phone. I have personally liked iMovie the best as far as it's the easiest for me because I don't have a lot of technology, other opportunities. Some of you are in digital art and you might have, other opportunities and things, programs you like, but for a regular user, iMovie is the easiest for me to edit it. So I also know that if I'm going to upload it to YouTube, it's the easiest platform because I can get to it easily, but I also have found that I need to keep it short, like 10 minutes or less. And so when I edit it, I shorten things so that I can have it less than 10 minutes. Or divide it into several parts so that way, I can easily upload it to YouTube. And it just kind of helps me keep a record too, even if I decide I don't have the place to use that. If I, want to do that particular program, sometimes I just rewatch it just to remind myself, oh, what color paint did I really use and what order did I do it? Because I'm not going to remember if I've done 40 different residencies before I repeat that one again. I'm not going to remember what I found worked the best for me. So that, more than anything else, sometimes just the record of it helps me to remember what I did, because sometimes I forget. All right, so now you're in the classroom, and I always want to make sure I have enough to fill the class period. Sometimes I take something extra just in case if there's any doubt that I'm going to be done a little early. There are certain lessons I know sometimes I get done early. And so I try to bring something else to do just in case. Sometimes that's when you can have the conversations with the kids. That's where I'm usually ready to pull up and show them something I've done in the past with a group of students and talk to them, do some kind of process maybe that we didn't get to show them. I sometimes pull those videos up. Sometimes I'll have an extra drawing project, because the one thing, but a lot of times it depends on what your art form is. It depends. I just try to think, if I got done early, what else could I do for 10 minutes? Sometimes they're ready for you to go anyway, but other times that you want to. So I also found out if I take too much time getting ready, that's when the students get antsy. So if I'm ready and we can jump right in, that helps a lot, especially with middle schoolers. That sometimes, they're at that age. Sometimes they're a little apathetic about everything. They usually really happy about art, or they're either that or they're very afraid about art because they don't want it to turn out wrong. So sometimes it's not until a little later they're pretty much having a good time. Sometimes a teacher will alert me that someone's going to be a problem, but generally they're not, because they're so excited to have art come in. As long as I keep moving along, generally that's not. I've only had one time that I can think of that someone had to remove a student, take them out, and that they actually had some learning issues to begin with, and the adult did it. But for the most part, most students want to be there, even if they thought. They're glad you're there and they want to do whatever it is that you're presenting. So, you can actually ask the students to help you with that, depending on your age level, have them be part of the process. This is where middle school comes in nice, because they are some of them you're going to find there's somebody that's wanting to be helpful, and so if they become part of it, that helps too. So, so that's in the classroom, that's the main things I think is if I'm prepared and I'm ready to start, I feel like I have less problems that particular residency. And then the next part is the part we don't like, and that's the business part. We like the part we get paid. It's just sometimes that we find as teaching artists, there's just so much stuff in the front end and at the back end to do. And so it kind of depends on, how you do it. And so I always just try to keep really good records. And like I said, that's hard. And for me, what I started doing is right away, someone recommended that I separate my money so that I have a separate checking account, and I put all my art money in there, and then that way I don't mingle it with my other money and have to look at my big checkbook and try to figure out where did the money come. Was that my money coming, from my husband or something else that's not art related, or is this art money? And so I got a separate bank account, and I didn't even call it a business one. I just called it another personal one, because then I didn't get charged for a second account. So that's how I did it. And that way, all the money that goes into that, I know came from art, and I have to account for all of it when it comes to tax times. Depending on how much you make and, how good you are with your math. I just found that my tax guy was very happy when I took QuickBooks and quit bringing them the big notebooks. I had all the receipts the first 2 years I kept them all and brought them to him, and they weren't, they were in order, but there was a lot of them. But when I went to something else to help me keep my receipts, he was so much happier just to get the little papers that, the reporting became much easier for me. So, so that's up to you, but you have to have something that helps you keep your receipts, whether it's manually, and you might not have that many things, but I found that, I'm always ordering supplies, and the only way I could keep straight of what it is if I take the picture of it and upload it, and then I'm always keeping records of, sometimes I'm keeping record if it's a specific thing, what one I used it with. And then I try to buy in bulk and buy ahead. I finally, quit looking around for so many different places. I have certain places I tend to buy because I've researched it in the past. And every once in a while, I'll recheck and make sure, is this really the cheapest for the quality that I want? Is still this the cheapest place when I buy it or not? And then I try to look and buy ahead. I made a little mistake, and I forgot to order something for next week, so I'm really hoping it comes in time. But that's part of the planning ahead, because then it's going to catch up with you if you don't have those things ahead. And then if I do inventory, I can also see if I'm running low on something, because some things I buy a whole lot of, and then I don't realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm almost out. So, this was recommended to me by Judy Sizemore, as we were speaking about her earlier. She was one of my mentors when I was in a fellowship. And she was my mentor. And one of the things she says, you tell teachers how to pay. You don't just, so you from the very front, the first, when you're establishing it, you explain to them with that, whatever grant it is, say, this is the process, and you explain, this is how it goes. And, you talk to them about whether it's coming from, hopefully from Kentucky Arts Council or any one of these other ones, that they need to understand that, and you need to know for sure if it's something you have to send your tax information to, make sure you've taken care of. And usually I type a little email the first time or two I talk to them, and send that out to kind of remind them, this is how it does, because sometimes they have to get a PO ahead. Sometimes the money's coming into the school. I think we've changed that. Cynthia, you changed it for you because we had so many problems, right? Because sometimes they don't, schools, that check came to them, a check came to the teacher, got turned in, and then it wasn't. And so in sometimes you're having to deal directly with the school paying. I think with Kentucky Arts Council, we've changed that. Is that correct?
Correct. The Arts Council requires the teacher to complete the final report within 15 days. And then after that, we start the process and we pay the artist directly.
So that's really good news because that's one of the things that, and that puts the timeline then, but then you're going to be reminding the teacher, make sure you fill that out. What do you need from me to finish that final report? And a lot of times, one of the ones that I've worked with in the past, we would always stop. And on the last day during her planning period, we make sure we had the pictures or the journals or whatever it is that we were using as our couple of things that we were doing as the evidence of the project. So we would sit down and work on that real quick. And we would make like a Google file and we would put the pictures that the kids did, or we would take a picture of the journals that they did. And so, or compile. So a lot of times, depending on which of those, it's maybe 7 or 8 things that you can choose. You had to pick 2 items that you're doing. And so you had to do it. But then I always kind of made sure that they didn't forget because teachers are busy. And you want to make sure they've got everything so that this report can go back really fast during those days right afterwards because you're done. And now, who cares if you get paid?
And could I add that it's a good idea to contact the program director once you have completed your residency. That way that person knows that the final report should be coming soon. So it's just a good reminder that you have completed it.
Right. That way there won't be as many mess ups and things. And then that's where that checklist I was talking about, where that's my final check off list is the last thing is, did they pay me? And if they didn't, then I need to contact back and start, tracking. If I know it, I did all my part and I got busy doing programs, all of a sudden I look back, wait a minute, I never got that check. And then you can start researching and finding out what else you need to do. So, and as far as like, this was I just wanted to end with this one because sometimes, you're looking for your dream job and the thing you really do. And what I really like to do is I do, murals, and I've done murals for organizations that I worked for a long time. But the fun stuff is when you can start doing the murals with the kids. There are other, and this is one I got to do this fall, but here's one I can easily share because you can see I wanted to show you this because I don't show any faces of the kids. So if you can learn to take the pictures in such a way that the kids, are in it, but now I'm not going to get in trouble for sharing their image because no one would be able to figure out, except there was a boy with a mohawk. They might be able to figure out who he is, but without having permission, I can use it as long as I'm over the shoulder or their hands or whatever. So a lot of times, I would love to have more pictures taken. And I know that in my schools, whoever's there, they know who they've got permission for. That's why I'm glad that they a lot of times are sharing that stuff. And that's how I go out in the community. I went the other day and then didn't think anything about it. But then I got to my next, to a school that I do every Tuesday. And they said, oh, I saw your picture on social media. And they pulled up my niece was in your program. And so they're pulling up the pictures that I didn't get to see, but know that that's when it's being shared and others are knowing about it. And that sharing is what helps you get hired the second time or multiple times. And I think, let me look. Now it would be a good time if anybody has questions or comments. And I'm going to go back to stop sharing. Okay, and I see Cynthia's. Yeah. All right. Anybody have comments or questions? I've talked really fast for 45 minutes.
This is maybe not like the most exciting question to ask, but we were just talking about kind of like the like transaction of doing this. So
Yes.
I've taught it with colleges more than K through 12, but do you have an estimate on sometimes how long you have to wait to receive a paycheck? Because it's something to plan for if you have to wait months at the end of that semester to get the paycheck.
Typically in a school, K-12. I don't know about college, but K-12, if if it's a grant different than what the Kentucky Arts Council, like we work with, it typically, if the school is the one handling the money, a lot of times they have to have a purchase order done before. So that's one of those things, tell the teachers how to pay you. A lot of times I'll say, do you need to do a purchase order? And do you know when that needs to be done? So that's one of the things that I write up, like a little blurb that, I kind of copy and paste and then tweak it for that particular school. Say, sometimes I have to get into the school before the board meeting, before you come. Because if they do that, then right afterwards, it's already been approved, but sometimes it has to go to the school board again. And if they have snow, like we did, I'm still waiting on some money that kind of got out of the system. And that school board missed their January and February meetings. So I'm still waiting on some checks for that. Typically within a month. But I know that, and they all clean it up by the end of the year, or they clean it up by the end of the semester. So sometimes things can drag out. And that's why I usually give it a month, and then I check in with whoever I did the program with. If it's not coming through and I don't know a reason, sometimes they'll tell me, I already talked to the school board and they don't meet for 3 weeks. So then, I'm submitting it. Some of them, especially once they've done this before, they'll say, I've submitted it. But that's why if they've done it before, they get better at it. But the first time through, the whole process. So sometimes I just plan on always having a certain amount of money set aside that I never spend, that I can do. And because I'll earn my money. Seems like residencies, and I don't know how it is in other parts of the state. For us, we're really busy in October, November, and we're really busy in usually March to April, but sometimes not as much because there's testing. It depends on what grade. Some grades, they don't want you in there, and then maybe toward the end of the year. And so it's very seasonal. And so then I know I'm going to make more money then. So I save up to buy supplies ahead, because I'm going to have to buy all those supplies if I'm those kinds, because I don't know, what's your art form?
I do ceramics as my kind of home media, but I can do lots of different kinds of art. So, I think, kind of my follow-up question to that then is, if I'm the one making the contact, like, is there a time of year that you recommend, like, when is a good time to reach out? Because it sounds like if you don't have a good first impression, that's kind of almost worse in some ways than, so you want to make sure that you kind of like, you make contact in a positive way and you know that it's going to be successful. So like, do you recommend a time to talk to schools, or like when to ask about art?
I would say it depends on who you're contacting. Like if I was trying to set up some stuff for this fall, I might try to catch them right toward the end of the school thing, just unless you know them and you can see them in the summer. Because if they could start thinking ahead, wouldn't this be a really cool art residency? I would maybe go, April, May. That's me. If I knew some, and kind of get them thinking about what I was going to want to do. And a lot of them will contact me. I'm getting contacted right now for summer. But last year they had certain deadlines around here, and I was being talked to in May about my fall residencies. We didn't actually plan dates yet, but they said, what about this, this, and this? And so then we started having discussions kind of early, but a lot of times depends on if you're having to reach out to them. And a lot of times I would go to, some of the other places I might get my foot in the door, which is if you have an extension office, sometimes they'll let you do classes out of there, or they have classes, and they're looking for someone to do ceramics. Or you might look at, just to get your name out there, any after school programs. A lot of them have after school programs, whether it's Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, or right after school. Sometimes, trying to think, there are some things, and Christine might know, what's some after school
libraries? I'm sorry, public libraries will sometimes hire artists.
Yeah, and if they don't know of you, and sometimes they don't have your name on a list or anything, if the libraries do, they're open because they're trying to get people to come in. And yes, they're open to different program. So that's another, like I say, entry level, because I'm not doing as many of those right now because I'm getting other stuff. And so, and I used to push myself a lot on social media. I don't do that so much anymore. I just don't have time to keep up with it. But the first year or two I did, so I was always sharing pictures because that gets shared, especially whatever you can do, put a few things out there just so people can see you. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, I did Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, extension office. Those are all the places that I did to begin with. So, and then it got birthday parties. But because they know somebody that's in a school, and I wish you would come to my school and say, hey, this is how we can do it. There's this grant. That's how I do it. What is the new deadline for? You were just telling me that teaching art.
The Arts Council's new cycle is going to be late April through July 31st. We found that teachers need to be planning for the year ahead, and they need it at a time when they have downtime so they can focus on writing the grant. So that's the new deadline.
Yeah.
Or window, I guess I should say.
Yeah, the window. And to me, that's usually, and they don't have time in the middle of the year. They don't want to think about it. They want it, but they don't have time to try to do it. So I would say you could start reaching out. Right now, everybody's, this spring and, give it a little more time. But if you have any contacts, I would start, maybe even going in a meeting if you have any kind of contact at all with a school, friends. This is where you ask your friends that are teachers, if you have any. Otherwise, go make some friends. But you could go to the office. Sometimes you just need to find the right person. And I don't know, that's part of getting known. And but the library is a good choice too, because a lot of them will spend money to have art programs come in. Did that answer it? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And I found, what I've liked is kind of as a follow-up, I was thinking about this today, is, I have found that getting in the teaching artist that doesn't feel competitive. There are a lot of artists trying to get in the schools, but I have found when I got into the group that everybody was very encouraging, and they were like giving you hints about how to do everything instead of saying, I'm not going to say anything because then they're going to take a job away from me. I've never felt that way. And so then I try to spread that out. Like when I go into school and they tell me they got the grant, I say, hey, have you ever heard of this one? They do really good job with music, or they're a really good blacksmith, or they're really good, they teach drama. Oh, she's great. They do literacy, so I recommend other artists on a continual basis. Anytime I'm going in to some of these newer schools, especially ones that have that. So that feeling of being a team is what I have found among the teaching artists. And I think that's a great feel. You would think, so it doesn't feel like a business. It feels, like you've got friends backing you up, and a lot of people have mentored and helped the others along the way. And that's been a great thing too.
Excellent discussion. Does anybody else have any questions? Got about 2 minutes left, but if there are no questions, is there anything else, Grace? Is there anything I can share? Okay.
No, I don't think so. I think I got everything on there that I was planning to say.
Well, you did a great job. That was so informational, and it's always so nice to hear how you do things, because it refreshes me so that when I'm talking with teaching artists, I can be like, oh yeah, this is how Grace does it. Hi, Dawn. It's good to see some Kentucky teaching artists, Arts Council teaching artists on here. All right. Well, Chris, would you like to say anything? I saw you pop up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Grace again for conducting this session. I've heard Grace speak before, and it's always inspiring to hear about her journey through this and the things that she's interacting and have occurred with her. I think you're getting an opportunity to hear real life examples of adventures and issues that have popped up in Grace's journey. But I'm always appreciative of her taking the time to enlighten us on this process. So Grace, we greatly appreciate it. And thank you for the questions from the audience. And it's great to see so many people on here.
All right,
All
before
right, well, thank you.
sorry,
Oh,
before you close out, Cynthia, I'm just gonna stop recording if that's okay with you.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody have a great day. And thanks again, Grace. I'll be in touch with you shortly. And have a good upcoming weekend. And yay.